Alright, we're live? If there's anybody in the chat, let me know if we're live. We haven't live right now. But what is going on today, everyone? My name is Antonio, and this is the special edition of the All Around Sports live stream cast. I'm your host, Antonio. I'm joined by my little puppy, little Mr. Robbie girl here. But this is my little Robbie girl here. But today's stream is we're going to be talking about some of the top free agents that could potentially be signed to the Seattle Seahawks, and then also along with some draft teams, with some people coming in the draft, because we all know the NFL draft is on the uprise after the Niners lost in the Super Bowl again. Sorry, I had to play that sound effect, but San Francisco, now that they've lost the Super Bowl again, now they have a little bit of a predicament on their hands, which could leave some stuff open for the Seahawks, which we'll see how that fans out. But I wanted to start with a few topics first before we get into the free agents and the drafts. Excuse me. I just had to have a little bit of my root beer. My energy. It's one of my drinks that I use. But first, we are going to get into the topic of the recent cuts by the Seattle Seahawks of Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, Will Disley, and then also now Brian Moon, who I think needed to go too. But the question being, is these moves moving the Seahawks in the right direction? I think they are, because we look at the draft, there are loads of safeties available that I'm going to be going over. So we will see what happens in the safety room. But tight ends, I think we have a good chance of getting a tight end maybe in the draft. Now, it might not be Brock Bowers, which some people are actually projected us to be a team to select Brock Bowers. Which means I don't hate the decision. I don't hate that, because Brock Bowers, I have seen him. I watch the Georgia Bulldogs every single time that they play. And he is an amazing tight end. And I think that he would be a really good addition with the Seattle Seahawks. But with some teams looking to rebuild, I think we just got to lower not too high enough pick to go after these big guys. But we're going to be going over all of that sooner or later. But for the second topic I wanted to mention, hold on just a second. This guy has some water, so stay hydrated. Another topic I wanted to add in here was the topic of the expectations, because I've been asked this question a few times by both friends or family of Seahawk fans. But the question that I've been asked a lot is, what are the expectations for the Seattle Seahawks next season? Oh man, I mean, I would like to win the West, but I'm going to set the expectation of being the second place, because don't want to set it too high, because we set it too high, it's not going to happen, like we know with the Cowboys. But I think that their best suit is to probably get second place in the NFC West and potentially make the playoffs. Now, I mean, this team has the talent around them. I mean, Mike McDonald, I think, was a really good hire. I've said this a lot. I think he was a great hire for the Seahawks. So, and then also along with, like, defensive coordinator, everyone. I don't know how to pronounce that. Defensive coordinator's first name and last name. Andre Dord, I think it was. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it's pronounced. But I'm not familiar with those out of the sorts names. I'm not familiar with those sort of names. But if they do make the playoffs, I mean, it's going to be a tough road ahead because we know loads of teams in the NFC are on the rise. The Bears could potentially draft Caleb Williams. The Packers are coming out of nowhere. The Detroit Lions are looking relevant at last. And then also along with like the Niners and the Rams, which we all know is a gauntlet. It's been a gauntlet of the division for years. It's been a gauntlet in the division for years. And then also you got the Cowboys and then the Eagles, if they actually are relevant this year, supposing they are. But and then you also maybe have potentially Tampa Bay. I mean, I'm just throwing that name out there because of what I saw from Baker Mayfield in that divisional round, and then also the wild card game against the Eagles. I mean, I also did a live stream play-by-play of the Lions going against the Buccaneers. Go check that out if you guys get a chance. But I've said it, if the Seahawks can get into gelling, if they can gel early, they could actually maybe be a playoffs team. I mean, I have them as a sleeper threat, but not potentially like contender. I wouldn't have them at the level of a contender, like the Cowboy fans always got. But for now, let's get into the agency list. I have them all written down on my little sheet here. So the first section that I wanted to get to is quarterbacks. So 2 quarterbacks that I'm looking at as a backup, because we know Drew Lock is going into free agency this year. We know he's going to free agency, just supposing that the Seahawks supposed to re-sign him. But 2 guys I'm looking at in the free agent market that could potentially be great backups is Gardner Minshew and Jacoby Brissett. Now, Gardner Minshew, remember, he almost led the Colts to the playoffs. He almost led them there. And lots of people forget that, but that's the fact. Because he led them to almost a playoff berth, which if they would have won against the Texans, they would have been the AFC South champion. And then we look at Jacoby Brissett. I've looked at this guy for a long time, and he could really look like a good backup quarterback. And he's with Washington right now, at the moment. And then I don't really want Russell Wilson back after that trade, but it's gonna be a hard year to see if we can find a backup. But moving down to the receivers, I think that our receiver core is pretty much stacked. But we know Tyler Lockett is not going to last in the league much longer. So, and then also we might need like a 5th receiver. Because we already got DK Metcalf. We already got Tyler Lockett, JSN, Jake Bobo if we could start using him. But we don't really have a 5th receiver. Which 3 names pop out to me when it comes to receivers in free agency. Calvin Ridley, Odell Beckham Jr., and Gabe Davis. So, Calvin Ridley, he had kind of a down year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, which, I mean, he didn't look really good with the Jags, but we saw what he was able to do in Atlanta. And he was able to shred up defenses. And if they can get him back to those ways, maybe this team could be a good team again. And then you got Odell Beckham Jr., a Super Bowl champion with the Los Angeles Rams. I think he could potentially be a great leader for as far as like veteran leadership. I mean, Tyler Lockett already has that, but it would be good to have another veteran in there. Plus a guy that makes one-handed catches pretty much all the time. And then there's Gabe Davis. He has been amazing with the Buffalo Bills. He actually had a hat trick in the divisional round against the Kansas City Chiefs. Not this past year, but a few years back. He had a 3-touchdown game against the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round in Arrowhead, which we all know how that went. But that's what I'm looking at for receivers. Now, moving on to running backs, which is I think is the least needed group of all of them. But maybe could potentially use some veteran leadership. There's four guys I have for running backs. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, and Austin Eckler. Now, Barkley, we know he didn't get tagged by the Giants, so he might potentially go with a contender like the Houston Texans. And then maybe, if not that, maybe like the Cowboys, which I would not see being the best suit for him. But, I mean, it wouldn't be bad to have another great running back. It wouldn't be bad because they're built. The Seahawks are known for their great running backs that they've either acquired in trades or free agency. Like Marshawn Lynch. He was traded from the Buffalo Bills. And he ended up becoming a superstar. And then we moved to Josh Jacobs. One of the men that broke the Seahawks fans' hearts 2 years ago with the overtime walk-off touchdown. Which I still remember that. But Josh Jacobs, this man is a beast. I have seen him play in games. And I'm surprised the Raiders aren't even trying to go after him. I'm surprised about that, to be honest. And then you also got Tony Pollard. Pollard, I don't think got used to his full potential in Dallas. Which, I mean, Mike McCarthy was using the run more, and then he wasn't, and then blah, 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 you know, Cowboy stuff. You know, Cowboy stuff. And then Austin Eckler. I've seen this guy for years. He can run. I mean, when the Seahawks played him 2 years ago, oh man, when I saw this guy, I was like, whoa. Because this Austin Eckler, I think, is a really good runner. And if the Seahawks could land him, might have potentially have the next beast mode. But we'll see what happens there. But not really much on the tight ends because the tight end market is not very high this season because Dalton Schultz got re-signed with the Houston Texans. So pretty much the only option that I could see him going for is their player, Noah Fant. Because Fant has played a key role in some points of the games. He has played a key role. And then you also got all offensive tackles. Tyron Smith and Trent Brown. Now, Tyron Smith, he was with the Cowboys. And he is a great offensive lineman. I'm actually surprised the Cowboys didn't even flinch to re-sign him. I don't know why they didn't re-sign him. And we all know Jerry Jones got a little something going on in his head. But I can see him as a top candidate for free agent signing as far as offensive tackles. And then there's Trent Brown, which I originally said we should pass on him because he was with the Patriots. But I'm actually changing my mind because this Trent Brown, if he can get the opportunity, I mean, we need the help. We need the help at offensive line. And then interior linemen, we got Dotson and Hunt. Don't know much about those guys. But now we move to the defensive side of the ball for free agency. So Josh Allen and Brian Burns have each been franchise tagged, which that kind of drops them off the board, which we'll see what happens in their signing. So that leaves Darnell Hunter, Chase Young, and Jadeveon Clowney. Now, Darnell Hunter, I have watched him with the Minnesota Vikings. He can play, and I think the Vikings have looked like a threat for a few years, but if they let him go, they're losing a big weapon because I've seen what that brother can do. Excuse me. And then there's Chase Young, who got traded to the 49ers, which that didn't help him at all. But now that season with the 49ers has kind of bumped down his worth, in my opinion. And if the Seahawks could pounce on him, I mean, of course, they need Leonard Williams back, which I'll be getting to him in here in just a minute. But Chase Young, he can run. He can pass rush people. He was the defensive rookie of the year, and then he became a beast. But he was held back because of all of his injuries, which is a concern if the Seahawks do sign him. And then there's Jadeveon Clowney, a former Seattle Seahawk. I've gone on about this man since he was with Baltimore. And this man, Jadeveon Clowney, has really upped his game. He has really upped his game in this season. Hey! Girls, sorry. Sorry about that, guys. It's just one of my two little dogs. But this is one of my little dogs, if I haven't mentioned her already. This is Sarabi here. Say hi. Oh, you gonna say hi? Oh, I know. But anyways, Jadeveon Clowney. Oh my God. Sorry about that. My dogs think they see something outside. But Jadeveon Clowney, he has been a monster with this team. He has been a monster with this team. And if they can use him to the probability that he can, and they can use him, I think that they might be a threat. That he might be a sleeper. Now, we don't know if he's going to get re-signed, but we will keep an eye on that situation. Now we move to the interior defensive line, which Chris Jones, and I don't think I've seen him get franchise tagged. I don't think. Don't quote me on that. I don't think he got franchise tagged. But I do know Justin Madubuike has been franchise tagged. But if we're looking around at other people other than Madubuike, I would go with Chris Jones, Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams, and DJ Reader. Now, Chris Jones, we know, is a 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Kansas City Chiefs that just won against the Niners again. And then, excuse me, then there's Christian Wilkins. Wilkins, I think that the Miami Dolphins are missing out on something. And it was probably a mistake not to franchise tag him if they haven't already. I haven't looked recently. And then there's Leonard Williams, which I think the Seahawks need to re-sign him immediately. Because you cannot give up a second and third round pick to the Giants and not keep him. You just can't do that unless you guys trade with him up to get to the number 6 pick. And then there's DJ Reader. Reader has been with the Cincinnati Bengals for some time. I think he's actually a part of the Super Bowl team that went to the Super Bowl against the Rams. I believe so. But now moving down the board to the linebacker room. Some I'm looking at is, other than Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, who I think need to be re-signed, are Frankie Louvu, Levante David, Patrick Queen, and Devin White. Now, Frankie Louvu, we all know he was with Carolina, but he wasn't really used to his full potential. And I think if the Seahawks can land Frankie Louvu, I think they could get a really good weapon out of him. And then we also move ahead to Patrick Queen, which we know that he has stepped up his game since Roquan Smith joined the Ravens, which is a main thing that teams are looking at to see how he improved since Roquan Smith got there. And then I want to move on to these two guys, Levante David and Devin White. They're Super Bowl champions with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That, of course, was led by Tom Brady. Who else? But look, these two, I think, would be a great combination if we don't get Bobby or Brooks re-signed, which I'm hoping those two do. But if they don't, I think that Levante David and Devin White could be really good weapons. I think they legitimately could be. And then we got the cornerback room. Now, I heard something that Snead got tagged. I'm not sure if that's true or not. And then also I know Jalen Johnson has been tagged too. So those are set. There's Fuller and Gilmore, Stephon Gilmore, which we all know he was a Super Bowl champion with the Patriots back when Tom Brady was leading the charge. But if they can, it's already competitive enough in the cornerback room. It's already competitive enough. Why not make it more competitive? I would lay down on being the competitive bit. But now we move down to the safeties. We know that we know that Antoine Winfield was tagged prior to the franchise tag deadline, which leaves Xavier McKinney, Geno Stone, Whitehead, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, and Deshaun Elliott. Now, Xavier McKinney, I know he played with the Giants, but he would be a good steal for this team because he's got the talent to do a really good job with this. And to reunite with his former teammate, Julian Love, which we know he's still going to be there. And then there's Geno Stone, which I think needs to be looked at because he is really good. He can read out those plays. And if they can do that, there is no doubt in my mind that this guy could be a great threat. And then there's Whitehead, which we all know played with the Jets. And, the Jets' defense is not all bad. They have a championship-level defense, but not so much offense. There's C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who was a part of the Detroit Lions back when they were on their playoff run. Which I think if the Seahawks could land him, that would be a big steal. And then lastly is Deshaun Elliott. Deshaun Elliott I have looked at. He looks really good. And I saw him in some of the games that he had with Miami. Now, Miami I didn't see as a real contender. I did at some points on my lists. But not really. But if we can get Deshaun Elliott, that would be a really good land. Now moving things down the board to the draft targets that I have in my mind. Moving things down to the draft, which we all know the Seahawks are probably going to draft defensive line and offensive tackles. But I've got a whole load of guys that I've looked at and I could see being really good players for the draft. So the first section I do want to go over is the quarterbacks. Now, the quarterbacks, I've looked at 5 of these guys. Is Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., Spencer Rattler, and Jaden Daniels. Now, Bo Nix, we know he's being questioned because he's a top pick. He's elevated to be a top pick. But we know that before he went to Oregon, he was with Auburn, which he was not doing so well with them at the time, which I think is a lot of things that teams are looking at. But J.J. McCarthy, a part of the national champion Michigan Wolverines, he actually looks really good, J.J. I think he looks pretty good. But JJ, he can take those hits. One of the things that he had in his scouting report, he can take hits. And he can absolutely survive hits. And he can kind of run a little bit of magic. Kind of like Russell Wilson was able to do. And then there's, I'm going to skip on Michael Penix for a minute. I'm going to go to Spencer Rattler. Rattler, I've looked at. He could be a steal in the draft because I've watched him both with Oklahoma, and also along with South Carolina. He looks really good. Sure, the Carolina Gamecocks have not looked pretty good in the football section, but this guy I could see being a great quarterback in the NFL. And then there's Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels I am looking at as a top prospect because if the Seahawks are going to get him, they're going to have to trade up, which I don't see that happening, but I have him on my list. And then there's Michael Penix Jr., which this Penix, Ryan Grubb has experience with him in Washington, which is one of the reasons I think we signed him. If we could land Penix, it would probably be a match made in heaven because he is known for being such a dominant threat. And Michael Penix, he can do so well. And he can be a great quarterback. And if the Seahawks can land him, I would be head over heels for that. But now moving down to the receivers, which I'm looking at 4. The first one is Xavier Worthy. Now, Xavier Worthy, we know, just broke the 40-yard dash record, which I don't remember the exact number that it was. I think it was like 4.21 seconds, which is what I think. And then I think this guy might be a speedy. He might be like a cheetah sort of deal. And he could be a really good asset for the Seahawks. Which, of course, we don't know. We know that Tyler Lockett's not going to be in the NFL much longer. And then there's another receiver I have in mind. Xavier Legay. This guy has been compared to Deebo Samuel. Actually they played at the same college. Not at the same time, but they played at the same college different years. And Xavier Legay, he could be a great steal for this team. Because I've seen what he can do in his highlights, and he can just run past anybody. And then 2 other guys I'm looking at is one of them being Luke McCaffrey, the younger brother of Christian McCaffrey, which some Niner fans I know are trying to get him because they want him to play with his brother. But Luke McCaffrey could potentially be a great wide receiver. Now, he played at Rice, which is not a very well-known school, which is not a really well-known football program. And then we move down to one of the great players' kids. One of the greatest receivers of all time and was one of the best 49er receivers. His son, Brendan Rice, I could see being a steal because I've watched this guy. I've watched his highlights at USC. He looks so dadgum good. And if they could land him, I think he might be a rising threat because he is the great son of Jerry Rice, one of the greatest receivers who ever lived. And that would be a great steal in my eyes. That would be a great one. But now moving down to running backs, which I know this is not a very big needed position, but I got a few on my mind. Cody Schrader, Dylan Johnson, Dijon Edwards, and Bruce Irvin. All these running backs, I think, are really good. They can be really good runners. But not about that. Moving down to the tight ends. Cade Stover, I could see being a great pick for the Seahawks. I've seen what he can do, and he looks really good. Jared Wiley, I think he might have potential because he's a TCU player. I think he has a lot of potential. And then there's Sanders, son of Deion Sanders, the Sanders up in Texas. I don't remember his first name, but he looks really good. And I think if they land him, that would be a really good pick. Then there's a lot of guys on here, but one of the top guys I have on here is Brock Bowers. Now, Bowers, in some people's mock drafts, has actually been projected to be the Seahawks pick in the 16th pick. Which, I mean, I wouldn't mind that because this Brock Bowers, he is an amazing player. But we need some help at the offensive line. And loads of these other tight ends have been really good at helping with the run blocking. And now we move down to the offensive line. Jackson Powers Johnson. We know he was with Oregon, and I've seen this guy, and he can play because he is a really good threat for this team. So, and he's a center too. Then there's along with like Christian Hayes, J.C. Latham, Troy Fatanu, and then loads of other guys on here. But now moving down to the defensive tackles position. John Newton, I can see being a great pick because John Newton has actually been projected to be a Seahawk pick, which, I mean, it's really good idea because I've watched this guy's highlights. He looks really good, and he can stop the run. He can get up in the quarterback's face. He can get up there. He can stop the players in their path, and I think he would be a great steal. And then there's also along with Tre'Davious Sweat. Tre'Davious Sweat, he looks really good. And he actually caught a touchdown pass, I believe, in the Big 12 championship game. Which, that is really good. But then there's also along with fellow Texas teammate, Byron Murphy, which I think could also be a steal. And then there's a Michigan player. Chris Jenkins. He can stop the run, and he was a part of the national championship leading team. I think he could be a really good threat in this draft. And then there's along with like Brendan Frisk, who I also know is good at stopping the run. Oh, excuse me. God, I'm a little tired all of a sudden. And then there's Leonard Taylor, which I think would be another good steal. And then another guy that I think is not being mentioned much. Now, I don't know if this has any relation to Alvin Kamara, but it's Muhammad Kamara, which this man, he is a beast. I saw him in the game against the Colorado Buffaloes. He was playing his heart out. Now, I don't know if he has any relation to Alvin Kamara, but I would think he does because the name is spelled the same. But now moving down to the linebackers. The first one is Jeremiah Trotter. This man, Jeremiah Trotter, he looks so good. Trotter, I've looked at his highlights. He can get those reads and stop the runs, which I think is what most of these guys on my list are. And then there's also along with Cooper, which I believe he plays with Texas Tech. And he would be a really good player for this team. And then there's also along with Watson, Nathaniel Watson, which I think would be another good steal. And then there's also along with two North Carolina and North Carolina State players, Peyton Wilson and then Cedric Gray, which I think these two guys would be great steals. And then moving down to the corner room, which I think is already competitive enough. Cooper DeJean is a really good guy. And he can return, man. He can return those balls. He kind of reminds me of Patrick Peterson when he was with the Arizona Cardinals. And then there's also along with like Nate Wiggins, Taron Arnold, also along with TJ Tampa and Mike Strinsdale. Moving down to the safeties, we're moving down to the final two before I come to a close. Just gotta get some water. The first safety I could see being drafted is Cameron Kitchens. This safety, Cameron Kitchens, he looks so good. And man, he can hit hard and he can read out plays, which is what I love so much about this guy. And then also along with James Williams and Anthony Ballard, and then Bullock, Bishop, Tyke Smith, and Jaden Hicks, which all those guys I could see being pretty good. And then the last topic, edge rushers. DJ Turner, I could see being a great pick, which I think he's personally going to go in the first 15. But this guy is a great rushing threat. And then there's also along with like Latia Latu, Jared Verse, which I think would be a really good steal. Then there's also along with like Darius Robinson, which I don't know how to pronounce his first name. Sorry about that. But and then there's also along with like Brendan Jackson and Chop Johnson. So and the Chop Johnson, he is I've watched his highlights. He looks really good, and he has been projected to be selected by the 49ers, which, I mean, I would not want him to go to the 49ers because this man actually scares me. Chop Robinson, he is a dangerous threat coming out of Penn State, which is also where Micah Parsons came out of, even though he hasn't won a championship yet, or even been to an NFC championship game. But Chop Robinson, I could see being a great pick in this draft, which if he gets picked by the Niners, I wouldn't know what to say, because that would be honestly a big steal for the Niners if they did end up getting him. But pretty much that's all of the teams I had, all the picks I've had for like free agency and also along with like drafts. So I am going to close this live stream up, but if you guys did enjoy this video and live stream, please make sure to hit that like button down below. Subscribe if you're new. Turn on the notification bell for day-to-day updates on my videos and live streams. I will be doing a live stream during draft day, which we will be seeing here very soon. But until then, I'll catch you all in the next one. So long for now.